I know you're in real estate.
Yeah.
I know you're passionate about that. What got you into real estate? Because I want to deep dive into this.
Yeah, yeah. I probably have like 4 or 5 answers, man. A bunch of them come to mind, like working at a job, a 9 to 5 job, where as time goes on, you start to think like, yo, nobody's ever gonna pay me what I'm worth, ever.
That's very true.
Going through that, right? Like experiencing a job where, and I think we could all like look at any job that we've had and be like, I don't like this, I don't like that.
Right.
But I realized like, yo, some of the people that I was working with, this was their whole adulthood was in this building. And there was one turning point for me. For anybody who's familiar, right? Like New York City has something called MCU, Municipal Credit Union.
Yes.
So a lot of like city employees, I used to work for the city of New York. A lot of city employees have a credit union or go to that specific credit union. Right. So after me and my wife got married, and I was already into real estate, and I'll get into like how that started. But one of the turning points once I got started was after we came back from our honeymoon. We went to open up a mutual or a joint account at MCU, bro. And I see somebody that I worked with at the hospital walking in like, dude, he looked like he was on his last life.
Yo.
And he still had like two more weeks or something until he reached his retirement. He's excited, and I'm sitting there talking to him. I'm like, you know, I'm happy for you. What are you gonna do? And I don't even remember the answer, but I do remember thinking like, damn, man, like, I hope he gets to enjoy a lot of it. But physically, the dude looked broken down, and nothing like, dude, old age is gonna hit all of us, right? But I just thought to myself, I got to do something. So before that, like what ended up getting, one of the things that got me into real estate, aside from like necessity and looking at my situation, I'm like, this wasn't for me. Like I didn't want to do this long term.
Right.
I started my job probably like a couple weeks in, and they started to like talk about the tier, like your retirement tier, like tier 3, tier 4, whatever. And all of them mean something different, meaning you have to be a certain age, you have to work a certain number of years before you can retire. So I did the math. I'm like, okay, so I have to work here for 31 years.
Wow.
And then I'm not a big math guy, but I like to run numbers.
Yeah.
My first raise at the job was an 11% raise, which sounds good, but it was spanned over 7 years.
Oh, so you waited 7 years for that 11?
I mean, I had just gotten into the city job.
Okay.
But it was, for some people, it was like retro, whatever. They went back. But I'm like, I'm doing math. I'm like, all right, 11% over 7 years. That's like less than 1.5%.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's inflation right now? Inflation is what, 4 or 5% or whatever the case is.
Yes.
I know they're trying to bring it down to like closer to 2%, which is why they're raising interest rates right now. But I looked at that, and I was even thinking about CPI or consumer price index or inflation. I didn't even know those terms back then, but I am thinking like, yo, do I want a 1.5% raise every year for the next 30 years?
No way. No way. It's crazy because you mentioned a good point there, and I went immediately back to like me looking on Instagram one day, right? And you see these elder people, right? Like older people speaking about life. Mm-hmm. And, what they would tell the younger people. And it always revolves, follow your passion, right? It always revolves, don't beat yourself up too much. Strategize. Look for other ways to match your lifestyle with your passion, right? I get it. Money's a necessity, right? Mm-hmm. But if you could find a way to be happy, like you said, you just saw that guy in the hospital, right? And we're all going to reach that level at some point where we're going to almost retire. Mm-hmm. And I look at that now and I'm like, yo, I need to do something now. Yeah. Just like you did, of course. Like I need to do something now to kind of like switch this path and find a path that's more related to my passion. Mm-hmm. That's I'll be able to make a living of, but enjoy the entire process. Because it's true. We live to work. And then that retirement gap is like super short. And it's crazy that it's that way, but unfortunately it is.
Yeah, like we work 20, 25, 30 years to then enjoy whatever's left at that age. Yeah. And God willing, with good health and everything, exactly. Like anything's possible. Like
I was going to say, yeah.
Andy was telling me about somebody he just met at a photo shoot. Yeah. Woman was like 85 years old, mad cool and everything like that. So you can be lively and vibrant for a long time, but
Right.
what does retirement look like to you? And I never really thought about that until I started working at the city, until my dad passed away too. Like that,
Right.
that opens your eyes because you're like, all right, can't take life for granted.
Right.
And nobody's gonna live here forever, right? So
Right.
what do you want to do while you're here? And even still, like it took me a long time to determine, if I had a purpose, if I needed one, what is it?
You know what's crazy? Yesterday I recorded a podcast with some ladies, and we was talking about the boomers versus us and how we parent, right? But one thing that stood out from that I could bring on this podcast is that, the boomers, our parents, their mentality was come and work, right? Work, work, work. And then they instilled those values into us.
Yeah.
We now have to take that experience, right? And, mix it with today's time, of course, with our knowledge now, and allow our younger kids to kind of like flourish in a different path, not just work, 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 and then retire.
Not just work hard, but like
Right.
work smart too.
This is where we have to make the change so they could be able to flourish in their future, of course. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up. But yeah, you were mentioning you was exiting out of that job, and then you took the path of real estate. So I guess you were leading up to saying everything that was transpiring in that moment in your head.
Yeah. So, and you brought something up earlier. You were talking about like God's timing being on point.
Yeah.
God, I believe God's timing is perfect. And after college, I graduated 2008. I stopped even in college, like I wasn't like a hardcore study person. I graduated like close to a 4.0, but it was like not doing the bare minimum, but I wasn't like a cram session kind of like college student. I knew my stuff and I stayed somewhat sharp, and then I would study when I needed to, and I did well in some classes and stuff like that. But after college, and not just college, high school too, I feel like I kind of coasted for the most part. So I never like really thought after college, like I'm going to be reading stuff. I'm going to be learning more things. I'm like, I'm just going to get a job and work.
Yeah.
I got very complacent. And I had a couple of people in my life, including a coworker that I would see every day, just constantly waving a book in my face. It was a book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh, I love that book. I love that
right?
book. Yeah. I want to reread that book because I feel like at this point in my life, that book will mean something different from the 15 years ago when I read it 15 years ago. Yeah. It's like I've matured a lot since.
Yeah.
So when you tap into those things, you take a different, like it shows you a different point of view.
It does.
Because of course you was thinking about other things when you read it. So it's always good to revisit books like that because that book is very important.
I agree.
Very important.
You know what's so crazy about what you just said?
Yeah.
The guy who's waving the book in front of my face at work told me, read it now and then read it again when you're about to have your first kid.
Yo.
How crazy is that?
Yo,
you
that
just said that. I'm like,
yo.
And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, I guess, all right, whatever. Let me read it. As I'm reading it, I'm like, I know why he said that.
It is insane. It is insane. It's true. It's true. You have to visit things that mean something to you in the past. And even like we're in present day, but we have to revisit that book at some point in the future again.
Yep. Constantly.
Because our kids have to be knowledgeable in those situations, especially involving finances and how that plays a part and how that matters in society and all that good stuff.
And not just that book, he wrote two other. I only read. I've heard of 3 of his other books. I think I read like 2 of them. One of them is like a book on tax strategies, which that stuff to me was that was another language. And then there's a book I haven't read, Cash Flow Quadrant, by the same author. I heard is really, really good. And then another one I read on network marketing, that was good too. But that was years later. But just back to the book. Once I finally like sat down to read it, I'm like, it makes sense.
Right.
He talks about I think there's like 4 different like stages to like entrepreneurship. Like you're an employee, you're a business owner, you're whatever, you're an entrepreneur. There's like different tiers. The top tier is where you just kind of like, you're like a passive investor. You're an investor,
Right.
but all you invest really is your money. You don't invest much time because there are people who are either hired directly by you or hired by an investment firm or whatever the case is to handle day to day. And I started to think about that, and bro, like that's the ideal retirement right there.
That is.